causes and diagnoses. ADHD is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders of childhood. Children have a hard time paying attention. They act without thinking about what the end result will be, or they could be overly active. They didn't always call it ADHD though. Instead, they used terms like brain injured, brain damaged child, hyperkinetic impulse disorder, clumsy child syndrome, hyperactive child syndrome, hyperkinetic reaction of childhood, minimal brain dysfunction, organic brain disease, nervous child, and attention deficit disorder. The first descriptions of children with ADHD symptoms are made as early as 1902 by Sir George Frederick Still and were thought to have a defect of moral control. ADHD cases began to climb significantly in the 1990s. There may be a few factors behind the rise in diagnoses, such as doctors were able to diagnose ADHD more efficiently, more parents were aware of ADHD and are reporting their children's symptoms, and more children were actually developing ADHD. Healthcare professionals use the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the 5th edition, to help diagnose ADHD. These standards help ensure that people are appropriately diagnosed with ADHD. Some symptoms that fall under the symptoms of inattention are often had trouble holding attention on tasks or play activities, has trouble organizing tasks and activities, often distracted, and often forget in daily activities. Some symptoms that fall under the symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity are often fidgets or taps hands or feet, often talks excessively, often has trouble waiting his or her turn, often blurts out answers before a question is completed. ADHD affects around 1 to 3% of children. ADHD is highly heritable. Both rare and multiple common genetic variants contribute to ADHD and modify its phenotype, and it often appears in extreme low birth weight in premature children. The evidence to date suggests that both rare and multiple common genetic variants likely contribute to ADHD and modify its phenotype.
The socialization aspect of ADHD. The relationships developed for children with ADHD can be extremely difficult on the children and the people that they interact with. These are the most common relationships children with ADHD have difficulty maintaining. The parent-child relationship. Parents that have had their child diagnosed with ADHD tend to have a more negative outlook on their child's behavior in comparison to the children that do not. Oftentimes, children will provoke their parents to get negative reactions just for attention. Friendships can be very hard for children with ADHD. Most of the time, the child is too aggressive and too demanding. This can be challenging to a child with ADHD because they always want to have things their way. Oftentimes, children with ADHD will engage in unfair ways, not being able to show empathy or a lack of selflessness. This often will lead to difficulty trying to maintain friendships in the future. Everyone on this earth deals with keeping the mental health in order. However, children with ADHD are more prone to having issues with their mental health. Anxiety is one of the biggest struggles a child with ADHD can have, and there are many different types of anxieties that affect children with ADHD. These are the 3 most common types of anxieties a child with ADHD can have. Separation anxiety is when a child develops a close relationship with someone or something, and the child has an excessive fear about it being taken away from them. This creates the separation. For example, a teddy bear or a blanket that they really like. Having social anxiety can result in not being able to withstand small talk or eye contact. It is also having a fear of being judged negatively and viewed differently by the people around them. General anxiety is the worrying and the lack of concentration to complete simple tasks throughout your daily routines. Kids with ADHD are at a higher risk for depression. Depression can make children feel worthless. It can almost make everyday problems seem more difficult than they actually are. These are some of the signs that will show if your child is becoming depressed. Unusual change in appetite, ideas which lower self-esteem, loss of energy, somatic complaints, change in school attitude, sleeping disorders, reduced socialization, change in school performance, dysphoric moods, and aggressive behavior. Based on research, ADHD is or can be viewed in a cycle of issues: behavior problems, learning disorders, peer problems, increased injuries, and anxiety and depression. For children that are diagnosed with this disorder, should be viewed with caution and paid more positive attention to.
As we said before, the impacts of ADHD in the family, not only does it put a great deal of stress on the children itself, but also on the parents and other members of the overall family unit. In fact, parents of children with ADHD have reported greater parenting stress, less satisfaction in their parenting role, and more depressive symptoms than some of the other parents with children who don't have ADHD. And while we've mentioned that ADHD is a struggle itself for the child that it affects, the family as a whole can also have certain negative effects for them as well, as it can be tough living with a child or even like the parents themselves having ADHD. But for the child, for the children's aspect, there can be a spectrum of feelings. Just a few to mention can be a sense of frustration, a feeling of being lost and disconnected, and also a feeling of the child being or feeling overcharged, restless, and out of control. There's more negative interactions with a child that have been reported through families, just with the different outbursts of energy that some of the family members might not be able to handle all at once. And while this isn't necessarily true for all families, families that have children specifically with ADHD, it's just a little bit harder for them, given everything that we have talked about and for what different impacts that the family has set for us. Moving on, with the ADHD in the classroom is also a big problem for the child itself, but also with the teachers and monitors of the classroom. In fact, one of the first places that ADHD in children that can be monitored and often noticed is in the classroom. The ADHD can affect students' ability to focus, pay attention, listen, or put effort into schoolwork. Kids with ADHD might also have various learning disabilities that cause them to have problems in school. Most kids with ADHD start school before their ADHD is even diagnosed by trained professionals, and teachers are sometimes the first people in a young child's life to notice the possible signs of ADHD. They may talk it over with the child's parent just to get them on board, just so they can understand what's going on for them and what different steps they can take going forward with the child. And then the parent obviously can then have the child evaluated by a health professional to see if it truly is ADHD. And then just a couple more facts. Children with ADHD can become more frustrated and overwhelmed very easily, especially in a classroom setting where other kids might just be excelling a little bit faster than them. They might have troubles regulating their emotions and struggle with executive function issues. And they may, for example, have greater difficulty planning, prioritizing, paying attention more than their classmate counterparts. They also tend to be less mature developmentally. Some children with ADHD are very charismatic, very personable, can become very popular in their classroom. But for many others, behavior problems result in rejection, isolation, and their self-esteem really gets lowered just based on how they handle themselves and how others around them can handle them and accept them into like their own little like classroom clique, if you will. Understanding more about ADHD though and how it affects a child individually can be empowering to that child. It's really just goes back to how you can really just accept the child for who they are, even though they might have some differences that aren't overall accepted among the children. But it is helpful for the kids to understand that ADHD, what exactly it is and what it's not. Like they're just normal kids in the classroom. They're not some monster that has been created like this. Like it's just something that they have in them that is completely normal, and how it doesn't affect them in any sort of way at all. And then it also goes into, with understanding comes the ability to work with parents and teachers to develop different coping strategies, not just for the child, not just for the teacher, but ultimately for all of the students to come together and just accept all of this in unison and just understand what's going on with the child and to see if they can all work together in one peaceful environment.
It is often difficult to predict if ADHD leads to mental health issues. The association between ADHD and mental health can be linked by several possible factors. One of these being genetic influences that lead to ADHD are often seen as similar to those that lead to other mental health disorders. The challenges of life with ADHD can make everyday tasks challenging as well. And on top of this, environmental factors can contribute to a number of mental health issues. These environmental factors are often known as triggers. ADHD symptoms could accompany some mental health diagnoses too. For example, bipolar disorder can impede concentration and contribute to hyperactive behavior, mimicking the symptoms of ADHD. A child with both ADHD and bipolar disorder will have behavioral outbursts, experience severe mood swings, and act impulsively. Children with ADHD that exhibits an inflated sense of self, demonstrates risky sexual behavior, engages in self-harm, and has little need for sleep could also be signs of experiencing mania associated with bipolar disorder. Dr. Harry Croft briefly summarizes some of these mental health issues that can arise from ADHD.
ADHD may occur with other psychiatric conditions, and the ones that are most likely for it to occur with are bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety disorder, substance abuse disorders, or personality type problems, especially antisocial personality.
From having ADHD myself, it is difficult to understand what it is when you are still developing as a child. For me personally, I always just thought I was a mediocre student. I know everyone complains for not being able to focus when they are in school, and that I understand. But with that being said, my focusing abilities were bad, and I mean they were really bad. I could not retain any information whatsoever, and furthermore, was not motivated to really improve my ability to focus. Focusing was not just a problem at school, it was also evident at home. I would often lose focus during a conversation and would completely drown out the noise of my mother while she was trying to talk to me. At hockey practice, I would get caught daydreaming while my coach was trying to explain a drill. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. This was a normality for me and one I had simply accepted. The main reason why I paint this picture is to help all of you better understand how complex ADHD can be for a child. As I just explained, I was unaware that my inability to focus was out of the ordinary. It's not like I could just jump inside the mind of a fellow classmate and come to the realization that, wow, it actually is possible to focus. That's obviously not how it works, and is why ADHD is a unique matter when it comes to discussing the development of a child. ADHD can have social, educational, and even lifestyle implications that a child often fails to recognize. From a first-hand experience, I can say that ADHD is an important disorder that should be addressed for any child that may show possible signs. Children are unlikely to come forward and admit that there's something may be wrong with them, and this can be the case due to possible embarrassment, but mostly stems from the fact that children don't actually know what ADHD is. For this reason, it is important for parents and educated minds alike to understand when a child may have ADHD so they can take the necessary steps to try and improve and provide assistance and guidance for the child.
Statistics all about ADHD. The percent of children estimated to have ADHD has changed over time and its measurement can vary. The American Psychiatric Association states in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders that 5% of children have ADHD. Looking at the graph on the left, we could see that it is calculated in millions, and the blue represents the ages from 4 to 17, and the green represents the ages from 2 to 17. Now, as of 2016, the National Survey of Children's Health decided to add the ages 2 and 3 to their data because more parents were diagnosing their children with ADHD, and we could see that from 2003 to 2016, we had a major increase. In 2016, approximately 9.4% of children 2 to 17 years of age had ever been diagnosed with ADHD, according to the parent report. Ages 2 to 5 approximately was 388,000 children. Ages 6 to 11 was 2.4 million, and ages 12 to 17 was 3.3 million. The parent report in the previous years, the percent of children from 4 to 17 ever diagnosed with ADHD had previously increased from 7.8% in 2003 to 9.5% in 2007 and to 11% in 2011-2012. So we could also see that from 2003 to 2011, we had an increase in parent diagnosis. The number of young children who had ADHD at the time of this survey increased by more than 50% from 2007 to 2008 survey to the 2011-2012 survey. Now, I feel that this is a major increase because we started to add the ages 2 and 3, and parents started to diagnose more of their children at a younger age. So just in like a graph kind of representation, the NHIS is the National Health Interview Survey, which is more just like a general survey than the National Survey of Children's Health. So looking at the NHIS annual representation, we could see that it kind of fluctuated throughout the years, but we still had an increase in the past 10 years. And also looking at the redesigned NSCH, we had a high number of percentage with the parent report. And the 4 to 17-year-olds of the NSCH from 2002 to about 2012, there was a larger increase as well. So here's another graph just to like kind of like show you guys like a different form. This is the percent of youth age 4 to 17 ever diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder by the National Survey of Children's Health. As we could see, not many groups have a lower than 7%. We only have about one. But looking at the southern states, it's more of a larger as 13.1%. And this is children that have just ever been diagnosed with ADHD. Looking at the next graph, this is children with current ADHD. And once again, we have a low number of less than 5%, but the southern states have a greater range of being greater than 11.1. I'm not exactly sure what each individual state is, but we could see that they are all greater than 11.1%, which is a pretty large increase, I would say. So, usually ADHD often occurs with other disorders and conditions. As of 2016, children ages from 2 to 17 have one or the other usually. So, nearly 2 out of 3 children with current ADHD had at least one other mental, emotional, or behavioral disorder. About 1 out of 2 children with ADHD had behavioral or conduct problem. And about 1 out of 3 children with ADHD had anxiety, and other conditions affecting with ADHD are depression, autism spectrum disorder, and Tourette syndrome. So, looking at the graph, our highest percentage is usually just another mental, emotional, or behavioral disorder, and a behavior or conduct problem was the second highest with 52%, anxiety with 33%, depression with 17%, autism with 14%, and Tourette syndrome with 1%. So the percentages of many children having other disorders is pretty high, and I would believe that this is the majority of just the overall grouping of children that has these other disorders. And here is our works cited page, and this is everything.